Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was never really a social butterfly in school. I preferred keeping to myself and doodling in my notebooks during class. It wasn't that I was a bad student. I just found my own way to stay focused. Most teachers actually found it endearing, and some even encouraged it since my grades were good. That all changed when I got the new history teacher. Let's just call him Coach, since he also coached the girls' soccer team. From day one, he had it out for me. The first time he spotted me drawing a little cartoon cat in the margin of my worksheet, you'd think I had committed a serious crime. He immediately started yelling at me, demanding to know what I thought I was doing and reminding me that this wasn't art class. When I tried to explain that it helped me concentrate, he cut me off and declared he was writing me up for vandalism and destruction of school property. The whole class went silent. Thankfully, when he tried to get me suspended, the assistant principal saw right through it. He simply told Coach that he would handle it and sent me back to class. Then he literally crumpled up Coach's disciplinary report and tossed it in the trash, just asking me to try keeping the drawing to a minimum. But that only made things worse. Coach started picking on me every chance he got. He would make loud announcements to the whole class, sarcastically pointing out when our little artist was actually paying attention. He'd make comments like that constantly, trying to embarrass me in front of everyone. But I wasn't his only target. He was especially creepy toward the female students. He'd make inappropriate comments and find excuses to get too close to them, especially this one girl who sat right under the TV mounted on the wall. He'd pretend to be adjusting the TV while making her incredibly uncomfortable. That girl, we'll call her the team leader, finally had enough. She approached me after class one day, asking me to join her and some other students in reporting him to the principal. When I expressed doubt about whether they would listen, she insisted, and I agreed to go along. We went to the principal as a group, but nothing came of it. If anything, Coach got worse. He started singling us out more often, making snide remarks about troublemakers and liars. The breaking point came during a library period. Coach hadn't prepared a lesson, so he gave us crossword puzzles to do. I decided to read a book instead. When he noticed, he demanded to know what I thought I was doing. When I tried explaining that the assignment was just busy work, he snatched the crossword puzzle off my desk. Something in me snapped, and I told him to just take it, calling him a jerk. That earned me in-school suspension, but the assistant principal pulled me aside afterward. He told me that while I shouldn't have called Coach that name, he admitted that I wasn't wrong about him. What I didn't know was that this incident started an investigation. Turns out Coach had sent more students to the office than any other teacher, always kids who never had problems in other classes. But the real bombshell came from the girls' soccer team. They revealed that Coach had been regularly barging into their locker room without warning. They'd even assigned one girl to be a lookout while the others changed. When they reported this, even the principal couldn't ignore it anymore. Coach was fired before the school year ended. But here's where it gets even better. A year after I graduated, I was dating someone from a nearby town. I told her this whole story, and her face went pale. Turns out Coach had gotten a job at her school as the girls' soccer coach. He pulled the same locker room stunt there, except this time he got caught, fired, and arrested. I never told her Coach's real name, but she knew exactly who I was talking about when I described what happened. I'm glad I lost my temper that day in the library. During my second year of college, my parents hit a rough patch financially. With 5 younger siblings to take care of, every bit of help counted. So I decided to put my education on hold and pick up a job to help out. That's how I found myself waitressing at this cozy, family-owned restaurant in our small town. It wasn't a fancy place by any means, but it had character. Most of our customers were regulars who'd been coming there for years. They'd watched my siblings and me grow up, and now they were watching me serve their morning coffee. The owner was this sweet, elderly man who treated his staff like family. The pay wasn't amazing, but the tips were decent, and more importantly, The flexible hours allowed me to help my mom with my siblings when needed. After about 2 years of working there, I had gotten into a comfortable routine. The morning shift was my favorite. It was mostly retired folks who'd come in for breakfast and stay for an hour or two, chatting over endless coffee refills. This one morning seemed like any other until it wasn't. My parents had brought all 5 of my siblings in for breakfast. It was rare for all of them to come visit me at work, so I was excited. My youngest sister was only 7, and the others were all under 15. They took up one of the bigger booths, and I was happy to be their server. I playfully teased them about finally coming to see their big sister at work. My dad responded that they thought it was about time the kids saw what their sister does all day instead of just hearing about it. The other waitress on duty was handling the table next to my family, just an older couple I'd never seen before. I didn't pay much attention to them since they weren't my table, and I was focused on making this breakfast special for my siblings. I was bringing out chocolate chip pancakes for my youngest sister when I first noticed something was off. The woman at the next table was shooting daggers at me with her eyes, but I figured maybe she was just having a bad morning. I continued serving my family and my other tables, making sure everyone had what they needed. When I came back to refill my parents' coffee cups, all hell broke loose. Karen started yelling to get my attention, specifically calling out to me, the waitress. I turned around completely confused and politely asked if everything was okay. She angrily told me that they had been sitting there for 20 minutes without even getting their drink orders taken, and accused me of playing family reunion with my relatives. I was taken aback, especially since it wasn't even my table. I tried to apologetically explain that I wasn't actually their server and attempted to mention my colleague, but Karen cut me off. She snapped that she didn't care who their server was and accused me of prancing around, taking care of my precious family while ignoring paying customers. Her husband just sat there looking embarrassed but not saying anything. That's when my siblings started looking uncomfortable, and I noticed my youngest sister was about to cry. Apparently, while I had been busy with my other tables, this woman had been calling me all sorts of names, dumb witch being one of the milder ones, within earshot of my young siblings. Before I could respond, my mom stood up. Now you need to know something about my mom. She's usually the calmest person you'll ever meet, but mess with her kids? That's a different story. My mom demanded to know who this woman thought she was. Karen proudly declared herself as a paying customer. My mom then told her that if it was that much of a problem, she should leave, calling her a witch. She went on to tell her not to dare yell at her daughter for something that had nothing to do with her, and scolded her for using such language in front of children. The owner, who had heard the commotion from the kitchen, came out just as Karen was about to respond. He asked if there was a problem, to which Karen complained about terrible service and accused my family of getting special treatment. The owner looked at me, then at my family, then back at Karen. He'd known my family for years and had watched me work my tail off for the past 2 years, without a single complaint. He told Karen that he'd heard enough and explained that he doesn't appreciate customers harassing his staff or using inappropriate language in his establishment, especially in front of children. He then asked her and her husband to leave. Karen was shocked and protested that they couldn't be kicked out because they were customers. The owner stood firm and told her that he could and would kick them out, warning that he'd call the police if necessary. Karen's face turned bright red. She grabbed her purse, practically dragged her mortified husband out of his chair, and stormed toward the door. But she couldn't leave without threatening that we'd be hearing from her lawyer. The owner calmly responded that he was looking forward to it and told her not to come back. After they left, the owner turned to me and my family. He announced that breakfast was on the house that day and thanked my mom for standing up for his staff, saying that she represented the kind of customers he wanted in his restaurant. The rest of the breakfast went smoothly, and my siblings thought it was the most exciting restaurant visit ever. They kept praising Mom, saying she was like a superhero. The other waitress felt terrible about the whole thing, but I assured her it wasn't her fault. Turns out she had been stuck in the kitchen dealing with a complicated order when the couple came in. We never did hear from that lawyer, and I never saw that couple again. But the story became a bit of a legend at the restaurant, and regular customers would often joke about making sure they got their drink orders in quickly, unless they wanted to face my mom's wrath. I met my ex-husband when I was 19, working as a waitress trying to put myself through community college. He was this charming 25-year-old guy who seemed to have everything figured out. Good job in construction, his own truck, and plans to buy a house. He swept me off my feet with grand promises and endless attention. We got married just 6 months after meeting. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I ignored because I was young and thought I'd found my perfect match. My parents tried to warn me about moving too fast, but I was convinced I knew better. The first year was okay, but things started changing after we bought our house. He'd come home late, reeking of alcohol, and pick fights over nothing. I'd find mysterious receipts for restaurants I'd never been to, and his phone was suddenly password protected. When I confronted him about these things, he'd turn it around on me, saying I was being paranoid and controlling. Then came the night I found lipstick on his collar. Yeah, I know, classic cheater move. When I confronted him about it, he didn't even deny it. I asked him about the lipstick on his shirt, and he just mocked me, asking if I was the laundry police now. When I pressed him about whether he was cheating, he just told me maybe I'd be more fun to be around if I wasn't so busy playing detective. That was just the beginning. For the next 2 years, he didn't even try to hide his affairs anymore. He'd openly flirt with women in front of me, take calls from them while we were having dinner, and leave me to handle all our bills while he spent money on his friends. The final straw came when I discovered he'd maxed out our joint credit card buying expensive gifts for some woman he met at a bar. When I confronted him about the $3,000 he spent on jewelry in a week, he just claimed it was his money too, and he didn't need my permission to spend it. When I reminded him we needed that money for the mortgage, he just told me I should work harder instead of complaining all the time. That night I started planning my exit. I spent 2 months secretly gathering documents, opening my own bank account, and looking for a new place to live. I also discovered we were behind on practically every bill: mortgage, utilities, and a massive phone bill that was in both our names. When I finally left him 4 months ago, he didn't even seem surprised. He just sat there playing video games while I packed my things. The real work started after I left. I had to handle selling the house we were about to lose to foreclosure, sell his truck that he'd stopped making payments on, and deal with a $400 phone bill that was past due. I managed to sell everything and settle most of our debts. When it came to the phone bill, I paid it off myself but told him he needed to give me his half, $200. When I told him about needing his share of the phone bill, he just tossed $90 at me and told me to be grateful he was giving me anything. When I insisted he owed me the full amount since it was his bill too, he just laughed and mockingly asked what I was going to do about it: sue him for $110. I let it go at the time, but then last week I discovered something interesting. I went to my cell phone provider to review my bill and found out I was paying $40 monthly for his phone, with over $800 still owed on it. Turns out he never signed the paperwork to transfer the balance to his account. I tried to handle it professionally. I set up a conference call with customer service and him. The representative greeted us and asked how she could help. I explained that I needed to transfer a phone balance to my ex-husband's account, and he initially agreed to help sort it out. But after 20 minutes of account verification and explanation, he suddenly claimed he had no idea what I was talking about, insisted he had his own phone account, and declared this had nothing to do with him before hanging up. I was furious, but then the customer service representative gave me some interesting information. Since the phone was in my name, I legally owned it. So I spent the next day making sure I had all my ducks in a row. I filed a police report about the phone, providing all the documentation showing his refusal to take responsibility for it. Then came the sweet part. I reported the phone as stolen, and boom, it was immediately shut off and blacklisted. But because he had been using that phone number for his work and all his dating apps, he lost access to everything. Within hours, he started sending angry texts from his other phone, demanding to know what I'd done to his phone. I simply replied asking what phone he was talking about since, according to him, he didn't have any phone connected to my account. When he demanded I turn it back on right away, I told him sorry, but I'd reported my phone as stolen since he claimed it wasn't his. I couldn't resist adding that maybe he should work harder instead of complaining all the time, with a little smiley face at the end. He's had to get a completely new number and explain to all his work contacts and special friends why he suddenly disappeared. I've been working as a bartender in various places around Europe for the past 5 years. The pay isn't amazing, but the lifestyle more than makes up for it. There's something liberating about packing up your life every 6 months and moving between summer and winter destinations. My favorite spot has always been Ibiza. The energy there is just different. Last summer I landed a sweet gig at one of the bigger clubs on the island. The only downside to seasonal work is the housing situation. You're basically forced to share apartments with complete strangers. And let me tell you, it's like playing Russian roulette with roommates. This season I ended up in a 4-bedroom apartment right in the heart of town. Sounds great, right? Well, it would have been if we weren't cramming 7 people in there. The rent in Ibiza is ridiculous during summer, so this kind of overcrowding is pretty normal. We had people sleeping in the living room, and one guy even converted a walk-in closet into his bedroom. The first few weeks were okay. Everyone was doing their own thing, working different shifts at various clubs and restaurants. I barely saw most of my roommates except in passing. But then I started noticing something odd. My food kept disappearing from the fridge. At first I thought I was just being forgetful. Maybe I'd eaten that yogurt and forgotten about it, or perhaps that leftover pasta wasn't as big a portion as I remembered. But then one day, half of my prepared meals for the week vanished overnight. I asked my roommates about my missing meal prep containers with the chicken and rice. One of them said they hadn't seen them, while another suggested I might have left them at work. I insisted that they were definitely in the fridge the night before. Everyone just shrugged it off like it was no big deal. I started labeling everything with my name, thinking maybe someone was just confused about whose food was whose. Property of the guy in room 3. Please don't eat. That didn't work. Neither did the passive-aggressive note I stuck to the fridge. To whoever keeps taking my food. I work late nights, and I need this food for my shifts. Please stop. The final straw came after a rough 12-hour shift. The club had been packed, there had been 3 bachelor parties, and I dealt with more drunk tourists than I could count. All I wanted was to eat the other half of my sandwich I'd saved from lunch, a beautiful creation with premium Spanish ham, manchego cheese, and my special homemade aioli. But when I opened the fridge, it was gone. Something in me snapped. I'd had enough of this childish behavior. If someone was hungry, they could have just asked, and I would have shared. But this sneaky theft had to stop. I went to the local shop and bought all the ingredients to make another sandwich, just as good as the last one. I deliberately made it look appetizing. Fresh bread, layers of ham, cheese, lettuce, and tomato. After eating half, I proceeded with my revenge. I went into my room and began my masterpiece. I sneezed all over that sandwich. Not just a little sneeze, we're talking full-on theatrical sneezing. Then I coughed on it for good measure. By the pièce de résistance, I took my work shoes, the ones that had been on the sticky nightclub floor all week, and gently caressed that sandwich with them. Every inch was lovingly touched by those disgusting souls. I wrapped it carefully in cling film, placed it in the fridge, and went to bed with a smile on my face. The next morning I woke up and checked the fridge. The sandwich was gone just as I'd expected. I took out my phone and wrote a new note, printed it, and stuck it to the fridge. To my mysterious food thief, I hope you enjoyed my special sandwich. I put a lot of thought into the secret ingredients. You might be curious about what gave it that unique flavor. Let's just say it involved various personal secretions. I won't specify which ones, but I'm sure your imagination can fill in the blanks. Bon appétit. I heard retching sounds coming from one of the bathrooms shortly after. Turned out it was the girl who'd moved in last week to share the converted living room space. She'd been the one stealing everyone's food, not just mine. Apparently, she'd been spending all her money on fancy clothes and parties, leaving nothing for groceries. She moved out that same day, claiming the apartment was disgusting and that she'd be reporting us to the housing authority. My other roommates, who'd also been victims of her food theft but hadn't said anything to avoid conflict, couldn't stop laughing when they found out what I'd done. When she was packing her things, I noticed she was wearing a $500 shirt while carrying a Louis Vuitton bag. Guess she could afford food after all. She just chose not to. For the rest of the season, nobody touched anyone else's food. My new note stayed on the fridge as a reminder. All food in this fridge may or may not contain special ingredients. Eat at your own risk. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.